Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Shivani, and I head the marketing team at Coditas. I will be your host for today's webinar on building micro-frontends with Angular. As the speaker, we have with us Varun Srinivas, partner and director of technology at Coditas. Hello, Varun. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
All right. So Varun will be introducing himself further during the presentation, so we'll get to know about him a bit later. And for those of you who don't know Coditas, we are a UX-focused software engineering company based in Pune. We help product companies across the globe in building and running cutting-edge digital business models, and we feel extremely proud to share that we are now a certified great place to work. To know us better and for some amazing content, do join us on our social media channels. We are very active on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, do subscribe to our YouTube channel so you are notified about our next webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat section. We will be taking them up towards the end of the session. Varun, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Shivani. Am I audible?
Yes,
Is
perfect.
good?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Shivani. So let's talk about micro front ends. Right. It has been established in the last 3 to 4 years that micro front ends is a really hot trend. You can hear everyone talking about it. If you attend any front end developer conference, there is at least one talk on micro front ends. You can see organizations jumping onto the micro front end train. A lot of developers have started using their own versions, their own frameworks which implement micro front ends. We have done something similar at Coditas as well. So it has started to seem like micro front ends is something that will solve all the front end problems that people have. Any front end problem that you have, micro front end is the solution. So today we'll look at the what, why, and how of micro front ends. We'll see what micro front ends are, how to build micro front ends, and why you should choose micro frontends, or whether you should really even choose micro frontends for your application or not. So a little bit about me. I'm Varun. I'm director of technology here at Coditas. I'm a software developer at heart. I love to write code. I love solving problems with code. I'm an entrepreneur. I had a company called Pseudosaints, which got acquired by Coditas in 2015, and that is when I joined Coditas, and we have grown to a team of almost 800 people now. I'm also an aspiring barista. I love coffee. I love making coffee. I love drinking coffee. I love the coffee experience. So, and probably 10 years from now, I would want to have a coffee shop of my own where I'm the barista. At Coditas, we build software applications with a focus on user experience. For our clients, we help our clients solve whatever problems that they're trying to solve by building software solutions for them. We are hiring for a lot of positions, so check out the link in the comments. Shivani or someone from our team will be sharing links in the comments, so please do check them out. And if you want to join us, you're welcome to apply. So before we actually look at what micro frontends are, let's look at how you would start the app. At the very beginning, say you have a $1 billion idea, you want to be a unicorn, you want to start working on your application. So what you would essentially do is you would build a backend service, which in this case I'm calling the monolith. But you would start building a backend service. You will have a database that you will attach with your monolith that you'll that your backend service will talk to, and then you will expose certain APIs from the monolith which your front end will consume, and you'll use some popular single page application framework like Angular or React or Vue.js or any of the other popular frameworks that are coming up almost every day to build your front end, right? And that talks to your monolith, and the monolith talks to your DB, and you have a MVP ready, right? So that's how you would build your MVP. Now your MVP is done. You want to scale your team. You want to hire hundreds of engineers. You want to have different teams focus on different parts of your application. So what the practice generally has been, we break the backend monolith into microservices because the monolith in itself becomes too huge. There are multiple teams contributing to the same code base. Teams are stepping on each other's toes. Releases are blocked. Release takes a lot of time. If the entire release fails because one team did some mistake somewhere, they were not ready to release, so you can't release your entire code base. So all that is a very common thing that happens, and so that is why we split our monolith into microservices. So you have separate services, separate teams focused on building separate parts of your application. They have their own data, they have their own layer, and they themselves manage it. They have their own release cycles, they have their own testing framework, they test it however they want, they have their own testing cycles. So it's all good. And of course your front end is still the same, right? Wherein you add an API gateway to all your microservices. So that kind of proxies all of the requests that comes in from your front end into multiple different microservices, but your front end is still the same. This has been the general trend until the last 3 or maybe 2 to 3 years, right, on how to build web applications. But in the last couple of years, there has been a lot of focus on user experience. Any front end app that you build, right, you want to have more focus on user experience. You would want to build offline first capabilities. You want your app to work even when there is no internet connection, or if your user is on a choppy internet connection, the app should work. The app should have progressive enhancement, depending on the kind of device that the user has, depending on the kind of the internet connection that the user has. Your application can progressively enhance itself, right? Then your application is supposed to do a lot of computation in the client side itself, in the browser itself, right? So there are a lot of applications we see where you can do photo editing, where you can do you can create a lot of models, you can do CAD kind of stuff in browser itself, right? So your front end application is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So to address all of these requirements that a modern front end application, a modern web application has, you of course need to have so many team members working on your front end app. So if your front end is also a single app, a single page application, then what happens is the same problems we had on the back end start coming up, right? Your front ends get bigger and bigger. Multiple teams own a single code base. So, if you have multiple owners for a single thing, what happens? They start stepping on each other's toes. When you add a new feature to existing code, all other features start breaking. You can't release. Your release pipelines get bigger and bigger. They take more and more time. You would have to wait 20, 30, 40 minutes for a release to go into your staging, dev, QA, whatever environments. Your tests, automation tests, if you write them, which you definitely should, right, they also start taking more and more time. For a large code base like this, your entire automation test suite itself takes around 30, 40 minutes. Then your entire continuous deployment is no longer continuous. You plan your deployments, you deploy based on certain timelines you have, and all of that starts happening, and that is not an ideal situation to be in. So how do we solve this? So we take the same approach we took with our monolith backend, right? So this is now a monolith front end. So what do? You break your monolith front end into micro front end. Just like you broke your monolith backend into microservices, you break your monolith front end into micro front end. So you break it down into separate smaller applications. Different teams will start owning different parts of the application. They can have their own release cycles. They can have their own test cycles. They can choose a framework of their choice. One micro front end could be in React, the other could be in Angular, the third could be in Vue.js. They could all be Angular, whatever it is, right? So it is up to the teams, whatever they want to do, they can do. And they own the release cycle, they own the testing, they own the if some team wants to rewrite their entire application in a framework that was launched yesterday, then they can do that. So each team has freedom. At the same time, your application still works. It doesn't break. Releasing something over in one place does not break whatever is released in some other places. Right. And of course, to bring all of these micro applications together, you add kind of a shell or a container application, which basically also handles your routing, and it also helps you manage your application state across all of these applications. So let's look at what micro frontends are. This is one of the first definitions of micro frontends that came out. So micro frontends is basically an architectural style where independently deliverable front end applications are composed into a greater whole. Right. So independently deliverable is what is the keyword here. So each micro front end you should be able to deliver independently. When I say deliver, it means you should be able to build, you should be able to test, you should be able to deploy, you should be able to make changes whenever you want, and that will not impact the entire application as a whole in a negative way. Right. Of course, if you add a new feature, you release, the entire application gets a new feature. Right. So independently deliverable is the keyword. So if you need something to be independently deliverable, it should be independently owned by a particular team. That is what micro frontends are. Now let's understand this with an example. This is an example that came up at the very beginning of the micro front end, revolution, for lack of a better word. This is basically a typical e-commerce website. This is from microfrontends.org. This image is from microfrontends.org. They have a full example where they explain this. This is a typical e-commerce store where you have a product page, and on they are selling tractors. So on the product page, there is a product team that owns the product page. In addition to the product page, you don't just see the product you want to buy on the product page, right? Any e-commerce nowadays, website nowadays, there is always some upselling or something like that that goes on, where the marketing team says, you know what, when they are coming to buy product A, you should also recommend product A1, A2, and A3 because they go along with product A, so they can buy it as an enhancement or as an accessory for product A, which is what is there here. So they are selling tractors. They have options to select tractor colors. But on the right side, there are related products which you can buy. There's something like a wagon or some other machinery that you can use with your product, which is your tractor. And also there are checkout related things on the product page where you would want to add to cart. You would want to see, you as a user would want to see how many items are in your cart. When you say add to cart, your cart count should increase. All of that should happen. So you also have a checkout, a lot of checkout related parts to your product page. Now, if you look at the dotted lines in this particular image, there is the red line. So the red line is what the product team owns, right? So think of these as three different teams. There is a product team that is building the product micro app. There is a checkout team that is building the checkout micro app or the micro front end. And there is a Inspire or the marketing team that is building your marketing, sales, or Inspire micro application, right? So these three teams have worked independently. They have built these three different applications, and all these applications have come together into this single web page for the end user to be able to make a purchase, for the end user to be able to buy a tractor on your page, right? We will look at, a real example on how this actually works. But the advantage here is, the related products team. So tomorrow, if the related products team decides, they want to also show the prices, over here you see that they are not showing the price of the wagon. So based on some ethics, realize show prices, the chance of selling is higher. So they want to make a change. They can just make a change. They can deploy their related products micro app, and it will automatically start working with the product app. Right? The product team need not necessarily make any changes in their app. Right? They are not bothered about it. We'll look at a real example on how this can be achieved, but that is what micro frontends are. So this is one way of splitting. If you have a monolith, if you have multiple pages, and if you have pages with a lot of different sections, there are two ways to actually break it down. So this is an example from the micro frontends decision framework from the book by Luca Mazzarella, which talks about how to build micro frontends. So you can have two different kinds of splits. So one way of splitting it is, a horizontal split, which we saw in the previous example, where if you have a single page, you can have, for in this example, let's say you have a header and footer that is owned by team C. You have a product details section that is owned by team A, and a product carousel section on the right side that is owned by team B. So multiple different teams have built multiple different micro frontends, and they're all composed together into a single page. Right, they're orchestrated together into a single page. So that is a horizontal split. And of course, the other way of doing it is a vertical split, wherein you split into separate pages. So when you go to /a route on your web application, you see everything that the team A has built. When you go to /b, you see everything that team B has built, and they have their own parts of the application. They are completely isolated. They don't even talk to each other. They might of course share some common auth or user authentication kind of data, some basic application state, but other than that they don't really share much. There is no overlap as such. The boundaries are very clear. So team A have a header and footer of their own, team B have a header and footer of their own. They can work independently, deploy independently. The users don't even know these are different apps. The user just uses the app, right? So these are two different ways of splitting your monolith into micro front ends. In real use cases, in real world apps, you would essentially want to do a bit of both. There are certain parts of the application where a horizontal split would make sense, and there are certain parts of the application where a vertical split would make sense. Right. So, for example, we just saw the tractor selling site where we had a horizontal split, right? Where we had micro front ends from the checkout team and from the Inspire team that came into the front end that was built by the product team, right? But there can also be a separate checkout app in itself where it's just a checkout team. There is nothing related to the product team or nothing related to the Inspire team that comes on the checkout page. It can be independently owned. It is a vertical split out team that is being managed there, right? So these are two ways on how to break down your monolith. So whenever you are deciding on how to break it down, what are the domains, how clearly the differentiation between domains is, how clearly are they separated, do they need to work together, do they need to talk together, do they have data they need to exchange amongst each other. Based on a lot of these criteria, you can decide whether you want to go to a horizontal or a vertical split. How to bring it all together, right? I've been saying, there is this tractor site where there are 4 different micro front ends that have come together. You can do a horizontal split, you can do a vertical split. There are a lot of ways to do together, to bring all of this together. One, very simple, no-brainer way to do it is iframes. It's not really a good thing, but it sometimes works. If you have very little or no interactivity, you just want to show a section and some other section, then maybe you can go with iframes. I wouldn't recommend it because of a lot of baggage that iframes bring, a lot of security concerns, a lot of other things. But if it is just, plain display and you don't have a lot of interactivity, you don't want to share application state with whatever is loaded inside your iframe, then go for iframe. You can do web components. Web components are, again, really awesome. Web components are basically components you can build without dependency on any particular framework. Like, you don't need Angular or React. These are pure components that you can build using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you can use it. So you can build your micro front ends. You can build an Angular app, expose it, or export it out as a web component, and you can use that web component in another app. So that also is one way of doing it. And we have you can have page level. You can have, like we saw in the vertical split, you can have page A, which is built in Angular, page B, which is built in React, and different teams owning it. And when you go to a different route, a different site loads all together. So that is, of course, another way of doing it. But since we are in the front end world, frameworks are a part of our life, right? So there are a lot of really amazing frameworks that have come up that help you build micro front ends. Single SPA is one framework that has been for quite some time now. So you can use single SPA. You can they have a very nice way of orchestrating it. You can have a manifest where you can define all of your dependencies, all of your front ends that you want, the tags they use, all of that, and it'll add a build process. It has a CLI that you can use, and you can build micro front ends using single SPA. Webpack has this new feature called Module Federation, where you can build some parts of your application as a federated module that can be exposed, and it can be imported by other applications and can be used. Narwhal has Narwhal extensions, the NX monorepo framework, they have their own implementation of a micro front ends framework. You can use NX to build micro front ends, and there are a dozen other, developers, really awesome people who have built a lot of, cool frameworks that are, focused on certain use cases, on how you would want to use certain things. So there are a lot of other frameworks. If you just do a Google search on Stack Overflow, GitHub, you'll get a lot of different implementations. Right. So you'll say, okay, Varun, enough talk. You're saying all of this is really awesome, but does it really work? Show me the code. So let's do just that, right? Let's jump into code. So what I have done is, there is this repository created by this awesome person called Jack Harrington. He has a lot of videos on YouTube on Micro-Frontends. So what I've done is I have cloned a Pokemon repository that he created, and we'll be making some changes to this particular repository to see if it actually works. So let me just quickly jump into my code. So within my code, I have two Angular apps. I have a home app and I have a search app, and I am running both of them. I have done a ng serve for both of them. My home app is running on a particular port, which is 4200, and my search app is running on port 4201. So if I look at this here, so I have my home app, which basically, is a simple home page, which shows two Pokemons. It talks about Pokemons. Oh, I just noticed that's a typo in Pikachu. And we have a search page which runs on 4201, and we have some default Pokemons. We have a search bar, and I can maybe search for certain Pokemons, and I can see what Pokemons are there. Right. So these are two apps I have. I'm sorry, this is bugging me. Let me just quickly go and fix this Pikachu spelling. So I just have a simple, HTML. And there you go. Yeah, that's all set. So these are two apps I have. Right now, these are two apps. It's working fine. We have released it in production. Let's assume we are selling Pokemons. You can, as a user, you can come to our website. You can buy Pokemons. So you can search for Pokemons. You can buy them on the homepage. We show some popular Pokemons and things like that, right? So now our marketing team comes to us and says, you know what, on the search page, even though the search is good, but we should show the most searched Pokemons, or, the top Pokemons in a carousel at the top here. So as a member of the search team, I say, okay, let's do that. So what I do is I open my search app. Within my search app, I create a, this is the home app. Within my search app, I create a Pokemon carousel component. All of this is already done. I'm just walking you through it. So I create a Pokemon carousel component. I fetch the latest Pokemon data from our API. I do some filtering. I do whatever is needed, and I have that data. And in my HTML, I just show the Pokemon. And I go to my app component. I have this carousel here. So just
Varun, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
There's a comment from Ankit saying if you can zoom in a little bit.
Sure.
Yep.
Is this better? Yep. Are you able to? Okay.
Yes, it's much better. Thanks.
Cool. Okay, so I have added the carousel here, and if I go to my code, there it is. So my search app did a reload. I can see my carousel here. It is fetching some popular Pokemon. I can navigate here. So this is cool. Right. So now again, this goes into production. People are using it. The marketing team again comes back and says, hey, you know what, search team, what the carousel you have built is fine, but I think we should also have this carousel on the home page. So let's also get the home team to add the same carousel. Right now, as the search team is supposed to manage that, because it should always show the most searched Pokemons, or the entire management of the carousel is going to be done by the search team, but it is to be shown on the home page. How do we do it? Right. So basically, what we would need to do is we will need this particular Pokemon carousel component to, and we will have to use it in the home application. right? And now I have it in the same repo. You can imagine, when you have larger teams working on larger apps, these could be separate repositories, or it could be separate parts of the same repositories where, your team owns a part of this repository, the other team owns, and you don't want to create a direct coupling. You don't want to create you just don't want to import the Pokemon carousel component, right? So what would you do, right? So as the search team, you decide, okay, you know what? I know that this carousel is something that is going to be required by a lot of other apps because this is a really cool component. So let me expose it. How do you expose it? So we expose it as a federated module, right? We expose the single component as a federated Webpack module that can be used by any of the other applications we have. So to build this as a to expose this as a federated module, we will have to make some slight config changes. We'll have to add Webpack to our app. We'll have to add a Webpack config, and we'll have to build it in a particular way. So for this, there is a wonderful Angular schematic released by folks from the released by Angular, the folks from Angular Architects. It's called Module Federation. So in your project, all you need to do is you need to just type in ng add at Angular Architects /Module Federation. You hit enter. This will look for all the apps that are there in your repository. It'll ask you for a project name. You can say, I want to do it for the search app now. It will say, which port should I use? I'll say 4201. I've already done this before. So it says, the Webpack config already exists, but let me just quickly show you what actually it does, right? So it does two things. One is in your main angular.json file, it changes the builder for the app. So this is the home app. So this is the search app. So for the search app, it changed the builder from the default Angular builder to the NGX plus builder, right? So basically what this will do is this will help you build your Angular app in a different way so that you expose, whatever modules you want to expose as federated modules. This is a custom builder that it adds in your angular.json. And also it will add a webpack config.js file for you within your app. So inside my search app, I have a webpack config.js file, which is where I will define, what are the modules I want to expose, what are the, modules I want to import from other apps, etc. Right. So over here, I want to expose my carousel component. So what I will do is I'll just uncomment this. I had done this before, so I just commented it out. Now I'll uncomment this. So basically what we want to do is we want to expose our carousel component. So this is remote. So, so in your Webpack config file, whatever is remote is what you're exposing, and whatever is there in hosts is what you're consuming. Right. So here we, as part of the search team, we want to expose, right? So we are exposing our carousel component, which is at this particular path. So we add this particular Webpack config. Let me just rebuild the search app because I made changes in the config file. So I'm just basically saying here that the name of the app is search, and whatever is exposed is present in a file called remote entry.js, which is what we'll be using in the home app to actually load this carousel component. But we'll look at that in a bit, right? So now my app is built. Now if I go back onto my search app, I do a reload. Nothing really changed because we have just made configuration changes. But if we look at remote entry.js, there it is. We have a remote entry.js file. So this is basically a file that Webpack generates, which is kind of a registry of all the federated modules that are exposed as part of your application that you've built, right? So that is basically anything that needs to import a remote app. This is where the remote entry is of sorts, right? So we have created a remote entry.js. Now, as the search team, we go to the home team and we go to all other teams and say, hey, you know what? We have created this carousel component. We have exposed it as a federated module. Why don't you all consume it? And don't worry about when we release it, when we make changes, you just use it and we'll take care of the rest. The home team is like, okay, let me do that. So we go to so I'll just close everything that's related to search. Now let's go back to the home team or the home micro app. Now the home micro app wants to add a carousel. So what it will do is, I've already created a carousel host component within which we will make use of that component. But before we go there, in my app component.html, let me just add the carousel component. And if we look at our carousel host component, it just says carousel host work, right? So this is the default, component generated with Angular. Now you can see the carousel is here. Pretty cool. It auto reloaded. So the carousel is here. Now we need to import the federated module from the remote entry file, right? So we will of course have to add module federation configuration, webpack configuration to our home app as well. So let me do the same. Ng add Angular architects / module federation. It will again do its thing. I'll say home. I'll say 4200. It will say it's already there. So I'm just doing that to show you how to do it, but I have already done it in the past, so it's already there. So I have my webpack config here. Over here, instead of saying remotes, exposures, I'll actually say hosts, right? And I will basically uncomment this remote where I'm saying that, I'm getting the search app. I want to call it search, and I'm getting it from 4201/remote entry.js. Right. So this is, of course, one way of doing it. We'll look at, how to actually import it in code also. That's a different way of doing it. But yeah, so this way you now will have access to whatever is exposed from the search app that is present in remote entry.js, and you can use it as part of your home app. Now in my carousel host component, what I will do is, I have this method called load remote module that is present from Angular architects / module federation, right? So what I do is I will load the remote module instead of, what I did in the webpack file. I don't necessarily need to do that. I can just load the remote module directly over here. So I say I want to load the Pokemon carousel component through this remote module that is present at this particular URL. The name of that remote module is search, and I want to get the exposed module, which is called carousel component, into this particular variable here, right? And I use view container ref and component factory resolver to actually resolve that component and inject it into my HTML, right? So basically, I get the component and I say create component. I resolve that component from the factory resolver, and I just add it to my view container, which basically injects into my DOM, into my HTML, right? And for the search component, there is a ability to pass certain search strings. So I'll say, I want to pass P. So it will search for all Pokemon starting with P or that have P in their name. And let me quickly go here. Let me just remove this. And now, if I, there it is. So if I go back to my home page, and I have my carousel that is loading in my home page also. This carousel is exposed as a federated module by the search team, and it is loaded on the home page by the home team. Right. So this is just a part of the magic. Now, once separate teams are using what separate teams have built, right? So the home page is using something that the search team had built. Now we'll see, how this is advantageous. What is the advantage? How you can actually realize this the advantage of Micro-Frontends, right? So now this is again in production. Now our marketing team has come back again, saying, one last request. Let's do this. We know this is really cool, but our users are saying that on the carousel, if you're able to show the speed at which the Pokemon can run, then we'll probably be more interested in buying the Pokemon. We'll know which Pokemon to go into. So what their requirement is saying is, for each Pokemon on the carousel, we want to show the speed, and this is something that has to happen across the site wherever the carousel is being used, right? But the carousel is owned by the search team. So the search team is who will actually have to make this change. So, okay, that is fine. So the search team says, okay, we will make this change. So we go back to our apps, search, src, app, the carousel component, which is where we'll have to make the change. Let's see, we have the name, we have the image, which is what we see here. You have the name, you have the image. So now you want to see the speed. Okay, so let's quickly look at our component.ts. We have image, name, and speed. Okay, very good. Speed is part of our data object already. So I just go to the HTML. I just add a new line. I say dot center. I don't think center would work, but okay. Speed. This is item dot speed. I just add that. Now I go to the search page. Okay, that's awesome. So it auto reloaded because I made changes in the search app. The search app auto reloaded. Now I see all the speed shown for all the Pokemons here in the carousel. So I can see that, okay, Charizard runs at speed 100. Charmeleon can do 80, which is cool, right? So now I have made this change here. I release it. But then how does this change? How do other apps who are using this component get this change? Now I have not made any changes in the home app, and that's why I did not auto reload. But since the search app did auto reload, if I do a refresh here, you can see I have the new version of the carousel, and the speed is also showing up on the home app, right? So the home team need not necessarily do anything. Whatever the search team does will automatically impact all other teams. So the search team is in control of the carousel. The search team can deploy whenever they want, however they want. Tomorrow the search team can say, okay, the carousel, instead of showing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I want to show 7 items in the list. The search team can control that. Instead of showing images like this and name at the top, I want to show name at the bottom. The search team controls that. I want to show 5 other parameters. The search team controls that, and that gets reflected across all parts of your application. So now relate this back to the tractor analogy that we had, where on the tractor store we had the right side where we had related products. Let me just maybe quickly go back to that slide. So on this tractor analogy, so let's say the marketing team now says, you know what, we should also show prices here. Some other team, the Inspire team, will add prices, and it will automatically start showing up on the product page, right? So for each of the accessory or wagon or whatever related products we have for a tractor, the prices will start showing up. The product team need not be bothered about what is being shown there, as long as it has done some basic setup to include that particular part of the application. It's good, right? So that's how you build micro front ends, right? This was a very small example, but the biggest question still is, should you really break down your monolith? You have to make a choice. Do you take the red pill or the blue pill? You can take the red pill. If you're a Matrix fan, you'll understand this. So if you take the red pill, um, it is life as usual. You forget that the stock ever happened. The last 30 minutes are a blank, and you go back to life as usual. You build your monoliths, you deploy your monoliths, and you're happy. If you take the blue pill, you decide to break down your micro apps. So what is the red pill and the blue pill, right? So if you are a team of, say, just 2, 3 front end developers, and that is and your focus is not a lot on building highly scalable front ends, then micro front ends is probably not a good choice for you. You will end up doing a lot of over engineering. You will end up having a lot of problems manage, and you'll have to put in a lot of engineering effort to actually maintain micro front ends. Maybe a monolith is a good choice for you. Take the red pill, right? If you are a team of who is building a large consumer facing application, and you see that you will be hiring hundreds of front end engineers, your entire front end will have to scale, your team will have to scale, your organization will scale rapidly, and you would want to release multiple features at regular intervals across different parts of your application, then you should probably choose micro front ends. How to actually do it? There are a lot of good resources all over the internet. There are a lot of good books that people have written, which you can read. You can understand the philosophy. There are a lot of people who call this, full stack microservices, wherein you have a microservice and a front end for that microservice. So you can do that. There are a lot of philosophies around how you can actually break it down. So that is of course beyond the scope of this particular 1 hour discussion we have. But yeah, so I think that is largely it. So this is how you build micro front ends, and you can decide whether you should go for micro front ends or not. Thank you again for attending. Please follow us on all our social media channels. And if you have any questions right now, I can take them. Let me just quickly, I have another screen here on my right. So let me just open that particular screen so I can see all the questions that you guys have asked. Okay, Soumya Deep has asked me, do you hire people looking for a career switch from support to a dev-based role? Okay, not something related to micro front ends, but yes, Soumya Deep, we do. We have a bootcamp programs where we train people who do not have a lot of experience in software development and to understand how software development works. We have boot camps where we train them in Angular, React, and Node.js, and then we give them exposure to live projects, how to build projects, and then of course you can get into any software development job after that. So we do have that. Check out our boot camp program. Avisha says, are there any openings for micro front-end developer? Okay, micro front-end developer. So saying, a front-end developer is a micro front-end developer, right? There is no such thing as a micro front-end developer. So, but yeah, we do have openings for a lot of front-end developers, and we are building micro front-ends for a lot of our clients. So yes, we do have openings for micro front-end developers, right? Omkar Lange says, is it possible to implement micro front-end in multiple front-end frameworks, like a micro front-end in Angular and a micro front-end B written in React and C in something else? Yes, it is definitely possible. All the micro front-end frameworks that I spoke about that are there, like, single SPA, even, module federated webpacks, all of these support that by default. So let's talk about module federation that we just saw, right? So here, when I say module federation, these are not Angular modules. A lot of Angular developers will think of this as Angular modules. This is actually a webpack module, right? There are differences, right? So you can expose anything as a webpack module, consume it as a webpack module elsewhere. Right, of course, there are different ways of doing it. What I did was very Angular centric, but there are different ways of doing it. But yes, it is definitely possible. A lot of teams are already doing it, and it fits their use case. I personally do not like the approach of having different micro front ends and different front end frameworks, although that is kind of marketed as one of the benefits of micro front ends. The focus of your organization changes over there, where if you have multiple different front ends, then the philosophy with which you need to think about front ends, all of that changes a lot. So I would recommend, if you are splitting a monolith into micro front ends or starting to build a new app and you want to take the micro front end approach, decide on a single framework and stick to that. At some point in the future, if you really see the need, or if there is no other choice, maybe there is already an app built which you want to import, and you want to make it part of your micro front end, then maybe you can consider that. But technically, yes, it is possible. If you go to singlespa.com, on their website, they have a demo where they show how they have built multiple micro front ends and got them all together into a single a front end. So their menu is like Angular, AngularJS, React, Vue, Svelte, jQuery, all of that. So they have apps built in all of that, and they all work together, talk together, play together, and all of that in a single site. So it is possible, but I wouldn't recommend it. How can we manage routing inside micro frontends, by Avisha? Okay. Routing inside micro frontends is an interesting topic, because there is your shell, the container app, which is responsible for actually doing the routing, where you can so it can take you from micro app A to micro app B, and within those particular micro apps also you can have multiple routes. So it is kind of tricky, but it's not impossible. So there are multiple ways of doing it. There is a very nice talk on routeception in Angular by someone from the Angular community. You can definitely check it out, where they load a micro app in a micro app in a micro app in a micro app, and each of them have their own route. So you can go to /a/b/a/b/b/a/b, and it loads micro app inside micro app inside micro app. So it is possible. Getting into the technical specifics of it right now is not something I think we should do in this particular webinar, but you can reach out to me later also if you have any questions on that. I'd be more than happy to help. Suraj Mishra, is it a good idea to change an existing monolith front end into a micro front end? Again, like answer to most questions in software, the answer is it depends. Right. So it depends on various different factors. One thing you should always keep in mind is micro front ends benefit developers more. It is better for developer experience, right? It does not impact users as much as it impacts developers, right? Because at the end of the day, for your user, when I shop on Amazon.com, I don't really care whether checkout is a different micro app or the part of the same micro app. I don't really care if header is a different micro app, right? As long as it works, I'm good, right? And whether it's a monolith or a micro front end, it works, right? But the benefit of micro front ends is for the developers who are actually building, deploying, maintaining these apps, right? So if you are a team of hundreds of developers, right, or maybe not even hundreds, if you're maybe more than 10, 15 developers working on a single large front end code base, then it probably is a good idea to split it into micro front ends where or 3 4 people within a team manage a particular parts of your applications, which is essentially a micro front end. And there is a single team which kind of is responsible for putting it all together, composing it, orchestrating it, deploying it, all of that. So again, the benefit is for the organization. You can scale faster, you can deploy faster, you can do everything faster, and you can be more agile, right? If you do micro front ends, you can be more agile. It enables you to be more agile. And of course, it's a very good thing for the teams because they are now focused on what they want to build. They don't have to be worried that some change somewhere else will break their app, right? They don't want to wait. They don't need to wait 20 minutes for their tests to run just to see that, okay, hey, this last test failed, let's run it again, right? So tests become faster because tests are running on a smaller code base, so it's beneficial that way. Wow, there are a lot of other questions. Okay, but I think we have time. That is good. Ankit Tiwari, how do we handle conditional rendering? That is, do something in a federated app based on where the federated app is hosted. So these federated apps, of course, you can accept parameters. So right in the example that we saw, the app that was actually the search carousel that was loading, that took a search parameter called p, right, which is what I passed in from the home page app. So based on parameters like that, you can do it. But again, a conditional rendering is, if it is smaller parts of the application, it is fine. But if you as in the question you should really be answering is, do you really need conditional rendering, right? Because if a certain micro app is supposed to behave in behave like X in one place and behave like Y in one place, then it should probably be two different micro apps, right? Again, I don't know the background you have, or the background, the reason you're asking this question, but I personally believe that conditional rendering is something that is especially in micro apps you should avoid, because then where do you define boundaries? Like so you have the app behaving like X and you have behavior Y. Tomorrow you want to add behavior Z, so you do it somewhere else. Then you want to add behavior W, you do it so then then again you have multiple monoliths instead of micro front ends, right? So that is you're again going back to the same thing. So instead I would recommend breaking it down into separate federated modules, separate micro front ends, and load front ends depending on wherever you want them. That would be better. Again, a question from Suraj. As we can use different frameworks for different micro front ends, does that mean that the transpiler uses the transpiled JavaScript code than the original code? Of course. So we added module federation in the example we saw. A lot of other frameworks do it slightly differently. So yes, it of course uses the transpiled JavaScript code. It doesn't make use of the TypeScript that you write directly, obviously, right? So it's built as a federated module that is exposed. And Sachin, are there any specific guidelines on handling authentication and role of app shell or various things? Guidelines, not really. It is really open. It depends on what kind of app you are building. So authentication can, of course, you can have your main app shell, which is kind of orchestrating everything, which is putting everything together, decide on how it communicates with each other. You can decide on how micro apps communicate with each other. One very common way of doing it is you can have something like an event bus that is hosted by your shell app, and all your micro apps post to that event bus and subscribe to events. Just like event based microservices, you can do event based micro front ends. And your authentication could be one of those events itself, wherein when the authentication is successful, it could be an event that all your micro apps get, and so on and so forth. So that is one way of doing it. There are a lot of other ways of doing it as well, right? Again, like I said, this is fairly new. Everyone is getting into it. Everyone is bringing forth their own ways of building micro front ends. So we'll definitely see a lot of standardization coming up as in within the next 6 months to 1 year on how we should do, what kind of guidelines to follow, a lot of things around that. Just a minute. Okay. Ajinkya says, what mechanism is good to share data among these apps? Like I said, event bus is something that will definitely help you. Kalpana says, how to share data? Again, the same thing, event bus. Let me see. Okay, Geenal says, won't the loading of the second app have some kind of a time lag, duplication of node modules, and some common services? That's a really good question, Geenal. So let me just quickly jump into the code and let me just show you the webpack config file that I have within any of the apps. So in my webpack config file, if I scroll down, you can see that there are some shared modules. So now that I have two Angular apps loading onto the same page, I can specify in my webpack config that I want to share Angular core, I want to share Angular common, I want to share Angular HTTP, and if you have or Angular router, and if you have any other library or package that you want to share, then you can actually share it across multiple applications. One good thing about Webpack Module Federation is you can also share singletons. You can share instances of your app. So if you have a service in an Angular app, right? So you can initiate the service as part of your shell app, as part of your main app, and that service can be injected in other micro front ends that load over time. Whenever the user does certain action, a certain micro front end can load, and it can get the same instance of the service that was initialized by the shell app. So you can also have singletons instances that are shared across micro apps. So to answer your question in short, Gina, no. So there won't be a lag because it is not downloading all the dependencies again and again. It is just loaded once when your main app loads, and it is used whenever your federated module is loading. That was a good question. Akshay Patel says, what are the disadvantages of micro frontends if we talk about resources like database, server, and all? So there's no impact to your database or server or anything as such, because ultimately your service layer, your backend is still the same. You have one backend that is kind of serving all the data that is needed, and you have micro front ends that are hosted on your CDN, on your S3 buckets, on your basically wherever you want to store them, and you can serve them over CDN. So all you need to serve is a simple static server, a static file server. You need to serve the remote entry.js file for all the micro front ends, and one micro front end can consume that particular remote entry file.js and put it all together. So there actually isn't much of a disadvantage on the resource side of things in any way. Varun says, what are your views on storing the state for different micro front end apps? Would you go for all states being maintained inside the shell app, or micro front end is responsible for managing its own state? So each micro front end should be responsible for managing its own state. But in reality, when you talk about web apps, there has to be some state that has to be shared across multiple applications, right? Which is where things like sharing singletons, etc., comes in handy, where you can have your services and your state being shared across. Basically you can also share. It depends on your use case, on how you are building it. Largely, I would still recommend that each micro front end be responsible for managing its own state. And Srirang says, can we use events of the exposed components in the host app? We definitely can. It's just a component that is exposed. So if my carousel component says on click do something, that can be, done by the home app. The home app can say whenever there's a click on a product, do this, blah, blah, blah. And the home app can do that. We definitely, so it's just a component, right? It's just consumed differently, but the usage is still the same. You're still using it as a component. So it works absolutely fine. Awesome. Okay. Those were a lot of really good questions. I think we are done with all the questions. So cool. This was really good. We are almost at the end of the hour. We have another 5 minutes. I'll just wait 1 more minute for any other questions. If we have any, you can add it in the chat on YouTube, on LinkedIn, or wherever you're consuming this webinar. I will also stop presenting. Okay.
Okay, I think we don't have any new questions coming in. Well,
Okay, that's cool.
we can conclude.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending. And like I said, we have a lot of openings. We are hiring for a lot of positions. We do have openings for micro front end developers, like someone pointed out, right? Basically front end developers and a lot of other, back end developers. We work on a lot of different things. So we have a lot of openings. Please consider applying if you're interested in working with us. And if you have any questions regarding micro front ends or anything related to front end development in general, feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media channels. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn or or on wherever you find me. I'm available on social. I'm fairly easy to find on all social media channels. And cool. Thank you for attending once again. You can take it, Shivani.
Sure, thanks. Since we have 3 minutes, I have another question if you are free to take it.
Yeah, sure.
Just had a question from Jinal saying, could you share some resources to dive deeper into the topic?
Resources to dive deeper. So if you want to understand, how to actually the entire philosophy of architecting micro frontends, I have this book here called Building Micro-Frontends. This is really good. Otherwise, you just go to YouTube, you search for micro-frontends, a lot of videos by the person whose code I used, Jack Harrington. So you can go to his YouTube channel. He has a lot of really cool stuff on a lot of videos on micro-frontends. So you can see that. And there are a lot of talks that a lot of people have given on how they are using micro-frontends in their apps. So you can also see that.
Yep. And Sujit, thank you. Sujit says, can you share the code?
Yep, I will push it and onto a GitHub repo. I have not pushed it right now. I'll push it onto a GitHub repo, and we will share that as part of a post from our social media. So be make sure that you follow all our social media channels on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a lot of cool talks like this that have happened in the past, and we have a lot planned for the future also. I'm sorry, Shivani, I probably said what you were going to say.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the last question, sorry, Jeetal is asking, is that by Luca? I guess she's talking
Sorry?
about the book. Is the book by
Yes, it's by
Luca?
Loka. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Janelle, I think that's answered. And Saurabh says, can we have recording of this session? Saurabh, yes. The link that you're viewing this webinar on, the recording will be saved on the same link. So you can access it whenever you want, even on LinkedIn and on YouTube. And yes, so I think that is answered and we don't have any more questions. And for the material and everything that like the code Sujit wants, so we will keep sharing more information about this topic on our social media channels, so you can get the data from there. Yes, I think that has covered all our questions. Okay, all right, great. So Varun, can we conclude?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much, Shivani. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thanks a lot, Varun. It was a great session. And to the audience, we have shared the feedback link in the comments. Please fill the feedback, and so that it helps us know how useful was this session for all of you. And until the next webinar, take care. Thank you very much. See you. Thank you. Bye.